Life in the Dust Bowl by Madeline Davis. The Dust Bowl was a time period in the 30s where everything was covered in massive amounts of sand. People's cars were stuck under dirt, houses were impenetrable, and food was lacking. The Dust Bowl, also known as the Dirty Thirties, happened shortly after World War I. Farmers were plowing millions of acres of wheat and corn, expecting the rain to come, but the rain never came. The Dust Bowl mostly affected parts of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, and Kansas. Housing during the Dust Bowl was horrific. People would have to wear masks to cover their faces and board up all their windows and doors so that no sand would come in and destroy everything inside as well as outside their homes. Clouds of sand would darken the sky for days at a time. No sun and no rain. Houses could get completely buried beneath pounds of dust, forcing people to move out. Oftentimes, they would live in shacks made of cloth or even in their cars. When the Great Depression came, farmers lost everything. They tried to plow more grass, but all that came was dirt. Farmers' lives became increasingly more difficult for many years to come. Black blizzards, like sandstorms, would strike and cover anything in its wake. When the rains came, people would get excited, hoping that the dust would be gone. But then the rain would end, and their crops would never grow. Animals died from heat and exhaustion, and sometimes even thirst. Nothing that farmers did could reverse the effects that the dust had on life. Overall, farming really did not succeed during the Dust Bowl. Rain dropped by a grand total of 27.5% in the states that I mentioned before, which means that crop production dropped by 75%. So even if farmers had been able to produce the proper tools to farm during this time, they would not have been able to grow anything because of lack of rain. Because nothing could grow during this time, many people could not get fresh food. There would be no rain for weeks, and when it came, there was little relief from the sand and dust for the crops. Any food that could grow either rotted before it could be picked, or was too expensive for anyone of the lower classes. For example, 2.8 million watermelons rotted in California in 1 year alone. Many people turned to eating foods like canned meat, corn chips, and fruit-filled cakes. Anything that was left over could be used for another purpose. For example, juice was preserved from the canned fruits and used to be poured over cakes and treats. During this time period, frozen foods also became very popular. To say that life in the Dust Bowl was difficult would not be true. Life was dark and miserable. Many people got dust pneumonia, which would lead to burning chest and coughing for weeks. Death was estimated from the hundreds to the thousands because of this. Unemployment rates soared to 19.4% of people. Men could go years without steady jobs, so people would have to move out and live in shacks where they would struggle for food. Although life was difficult, there were some reliefs, such as radios. Radios were used in almost every home to be able to distract people from the life outside. It could block out all the sound of the black blizzards coming their way. Overall, life during the Dust Bowl was very difficult. Families had a hard time sticking together because men could not hold a steady job, and often they would have to move to different states to find a different life. Nearly 30 million people lost their jobs during this time period. 50% of all crops failed in Arkansas. It is recorded that one single dust storm hit 6 different states at one time. It was called Black Sunday, and it happened in 1934. Thank you so much for watching. I'd like to give a special thanks to Miss Berger, who is my teacher, for Year 4 Rhetoric History for online classes with LLC. Also, I'd like to thank everyone else in my class for their awesome support.